if you apply pressure on a healthy tree, it's very difficult to take it down, right? But if you apply pressure on a tree that is, an old tree that is already cracking, well, you can probably tear it down. And this is what we think is happening right now.
Olá, Canal Brasil está aqui em Washington, na sede da Organização dos Estados Americanos. Canal Brasil, claro, uma realização foi Comércio, São Paulo. Nós estamos hoje recebendo Rafael de la Cruz. Ele é gerente geral do Banco Interamericano de Desenvolvimento para os países andinos. Mr. de la Cruz, thank you very much for being here with us.
Very, very pleased to be with you here.
Mr. de la Cruz, let me start with a big picture. What you think should be the priorities for the governments of Latin America to increase development, economic growth in the region?
Yes. But that's the main question for Latin America, of course. We have been lagging for many, many years in productivity and general economic growth. That's the main challenge, no doubt. So there, something that has to be said immediately is that in Latin America we had two big public sectors that have been investing for a long time, providing public services that are very important, of course, but also, trying to be an entrepreneur too, trying to be a business people too, and the governments don't know very well how to do that. That's something that is important to say in the first place. In Latin America, we like a lot of that type of things, but it's proved that is not really a great idea. So main thing is to improve, to increase incentive for the private sector to invest. In certain countries, though, it is very important the public investment in infrastructure and public services. One of the studies we made at the IDB at a given point a few years ago, clearly showed that one of the reasons why productivity didn't grow in Latin America was because of problems with infrastructure. At this point, it's not only roads and seaports and airports and bridges, etc. It's also digital infrastructure. So this is something that the public sector has to do, and the public sector has done that in all the developed countries. So it's not something that is not known in history. So there is a reason why the public investment has to be made, because of it's going to eventually increase productivity. Let me tell you, this productivity in Latin America has grown zero practically for the last 30 years.
30?
So, yeah, growth in Latin America depends basically on capital and labor. All the capital and labor that gets into the economy makes the economy grow. But one very key aspect of growth, which is productivity in Latin America, is really lacking that. And again, there are many reasons for that. There is also education. There are all type of different constraints, but the infrastructure constraint is extremely important. So if we could invest massively and for a relatively long period of time in infrastructure, that would be a big boost to the economy in two ways. The first one, you are going to have a clear, typical Keynesian effect, which is the creation of the demand that the government is doing, with this type of investment. But also, most important is that over time is going to increase productivity. So you are going to have an economy that is more healthy, because it doesn't only grow because of capital and labor, but also because of productivity. So that's something that is very important for the to do as a public investment. But at the same time, we don't need all this public investment. Infrastructure has to be public. Part of the investment can be and should be actually provided by the private sector.
So there's after COVID-19, there was a tightening of the fiscal constraints of the. So what are you telling us is that yes, there is this constraints, but the government must spend more that's smarter. So you choose several areas, and there are areas that states should be diminished. That you have to give to the private sector, some sectors that in most Latin America countries are controlled by the government.
But the thing is that the governments spend a lot of, in Latin America, government spends a lot of subsidies.
Yes.
So in this sense, it's not always lack of financing that you have, is where do you put your effort? So in our opinion, the idea would be to reduce a little bit the subsidies and increase investment. One of the main things that you can see everywhere in Latin America when you analyze the public expenditure is that the investment is always very little. In Latin America, typically you get 3% of GDP investment as an average. And then you get sometimes 10, 15, 20% of GDP on all sort of subsidies. Some of them are subsidies that you need, for example, Social Security, but then you get many subsidies that are actually really bad for the economy and really bad for the people, actually. And in that sense, there is a balance that you have to make a little bit, how much you want to support with subsidies certain priorities of the political priorities, and how much you want to actually invest in the future, invest in more productivity, invest in more wealthy and healthy economies in the region.
We nowadays in a transition of these new technologies that are taking shape and probably unpredictable ways. What will be the future with this new technology? How to encourage innovation through new technologies in Latin America, in our countries?
The first thing is property rights, no doubt. People without property rights that they don't feel incentivized to innovate or do anything, particularly because innovation typically is more it's not material, it's intellectual, and you need a lot of protection on that. Many countries in Latin America actually have done a lot trying to increase the protection of property rights for innovators. The second thing is being open to ideas, dare to do things that are different. Many business people in Latin America have done fantastic jobs, fantastic companies, but some of them are very traditional. They think that, my business is doing well, why should I innovate? Well, innovation is always the key for growing more. So in that sense, there is something that it has to do with being daring to be open to new ideas. This is something I would say very important, because our business people in the region needs a lot of that. There are some extraordinary good examples right now, actually, in the whole region, in Latin America, that tends to give more importance to innovation. But there, I think that a change of mind, trying to being open is very important. And I would say a third thing, capital. You need a lot of capital
Yeah.
in order to do that. Here in the United States, you know very well, you have all this risk capital that you can invest in 100 startups, and probably one or two only really are able to thrive. But this one or two make up for the whole other failures, So that the role that two give to the economy is extremely important. And any capitalist that has invested on the 100 that most of them fail has a return, handsome return from the one or two that actually are successful. So in that sense, it's something about, because we don't have lack of capital in Latin America. We could have more, of course, but we have a lot of capital in Latin America. But the point is, where do I put my capital? People, investors that want to do things, where do I put my capital? And we should learn from the experience in other countries, particularly here in the United States, of course, where you have clearly people that understand that the future is not like the past. So you need to, again, innovate and invest on that.
Mr. Dela Cruz, you have long advocated for the decentralization of government to better attend the public. How decentralization increase growth in every country, but focusing in Latin America? Why decentralization might be a good way to development at more accelerated pace?
Yes. Well, the key of decentralization is to give to lower levels of government, states and municipalities, the power to actually decide on what they need in order to have good governance on the one hand, but also to grow on the other hand, to have a wealthy and healthy economy. And if we go back a little bit on what we were talking about infrastructure, it is very difficult for a minister at the federal level, to think about every single thing, that is needed in the whole country in terms of infrastructure, for example, the same point that we were making before. But this is something that is easier for a governor or a mayor closer touch with their business community in these areas, with the people in this area, to understand exactly what is needed. So in that sense, I would say that if we bet on investment in infrastructure, investment in public services, we should bet also on decentralization, because you're going to have, of course, projects that are national scope. It was a national scope. That's very important. Those projects are key. But there are many projects that are at the regional and local level that is extremely difficult for a national government to understand and to get into that. So in that sense, talking about not only governance, which is also a very important part of the decentralization, you want people to feel that their government is close to them, and that's extremely important in order to improve and strengthen democracy. There is this other aspect that you raise that I like very much, which is the way to lead regional and local governments to actually contribute to growth through a smarter investment in their circumstances.
Rafael de la Cruz, além de ser grande economista, ele também é o representante aqui em Washington da María Corina e do presidente eleito González. Ele é venezuelano e representa aqui nos Estados Unidos a oposição ao governo de Nicolás Maduro na Venezuela. Mr. de la Cruz, I would like to ask you on the way that your country is now. There was an election. Internationally, it was not recognized as a fair election. What are the position of the opposition in Venezuela in this moment when the actual government in Venezuela are not allowing the verification of the election as it was held a couple months ago?
Yes. Well, it is very clear, I think, for everybody in the world that our candidate, Edmundo González Urrutia, won the election by a very landslide. That's what it is. The Maduro regime themselves, they know too. They are simply denying us, denying the popular will, denying the Constitution. So what we are doing now is to, first of all, put in place a broad international coalition in order to recognize that our candidate won, that María Corina Machado is the leader, actually, of the democratic forces in Venezuela. We are not calling ourselves anymore opposition. We are a government in waiting. We are a government-elect. And we are trying to, as I said, put together this broad international coalition. We are very happy that that's something that is happening. And actually, we want to recognize the contribution of Brazil and Colombia that has been very straightforward and saying that they are ready to intermediate in whatever kind of negotiation we can establish with the regime. We have said many times that we are open for negotiation to perform an orderly and peaceful transfer of government. Unfortunately, the regime is not up to that at this point. However, the regime is cracking internally. It's cracking. There are different fractions in the government and different fractions actually in the military, I have to say. It's extremely complicated, the situation that they have. And what we are doing right now is putting pressure, literally putting pressure on these structures in order for them to understand that they cannot normalize the situation. They lost total legitimacy with the election. They would expect normalization after the 10th of January, which would be the change of government. We are putting all the pressure possible internationally and nationally to let them understand that there is no way to normalize in the future. So if they feel that they think that they are not going to be able to normalize because of this broad coalition that we have, they are going to be probably more able to start negotiations. And this is where Brazil or Colombia, President Lula and President Petro, may play an important role as intermediaries. We understand that the regime is not going to reach out to us directly. We need somehow people that are in the middle that are able to talk with the two sides. We know that all the parties in Brazil and the people in Brazil are with Venezuelans in our fight for freedom, in our fight for democracy.
Mr. De La Cruz, what's the situation on the ground for people in the opposition on the regime? There is a perception that there is a closing of the regime or oppressing it. How is the situation on the ground for people who are members of the regime?
It's really bad. It's really bad. We got more than 2,000 people in prison after the 20th of July, which was the election day. There's people that have been killed, about 30 people that have been killed. There are people in prison that are kids and women that have been abused. This is state terrorism, what they are applying to our own population. But again, we think that this sacrifice is worth it. We think that we are close to reach our goal, which is reestablish the rule of law, reestablish the rule of the Constitution, and getting Nuno González Urrutia to be inaugurated as a president on the 10th of January. So, I can think easily about countries that can, get rid of a dictatorship like this without a lot of sacrifices. And the Venezuela, we are, doing the same that many other people, many other courageous nations in the world have done before. So that's something that we do with a lot of pride. This is a Venezuelan problem. We are going to resolve this, but we need, no doubt, the support of our international partners in order to achieve their objective of freedom.
This regime that is becoming more oppressive, unless it was for some time now. But I feel that in the region, Latin American region, the other countries, neighbors of Venezuela, there's a kind of consensus now. In the recent past, the pressures come from here, from the United States, from Europe. My perception is correct. There's now, you think, a consensus. You mentioned Colombia and Brazil, but there's a consensus that is regional too now, and it was not like that 5-10 years ago.
A consensus, you mean about
the legitimacy of the government?
Absolutely. I mean, all the democracies in the world, all of them, has rejected the fraud, the coup d'etat, actually, that Maduro is trying to perform right now, denying, our triumph. Nobody believes that they won, and that means that they don't have the legitimacy. They lost that. And the point here is, since they know that they are not going to regain legitimacy because they lost the election, and they lost it by a humongous margin. Actually, let me make a little parenthesis here. 5 million Venezuelans weren't able to vote. I couldn't. 5 million. 4 outside the country and 1 in the country. Because the different tricks that they made in order to prevent us from voting. I couldn't vote. I won was of the 5 million. So if we all these 5 million that weren't able to vote because the regime prevented us from doing that, would have voted, it would have not been 30%, 70%, it would have been 90-10. So they know that, and the world know that. So no doubt that they lost legitimacy. What they want is to normalize the regime. They're going to say, well, okay, I stay here. The 10th of January, I'm here. I put on my own band, presidential band, with the people that are not independent. Congress is not independent. The judiciary is not independent. Nobody that is independent except for, all depends on the government, on the regime. So I stay here, and then, Venezuela is an important country. We got, we are the first reserve of oil in the world, et cetera, et cetera. So they will need to somehow normalize the situation, the relationship with Venezuela. And what we are trying to do, and we are achieving this goal, is to say, no, you are not going to be able to do that. And again, as I said before, this is a way for the cracking inside the government to actually collapse. And our hope is not that there is a collapse of the regime. Our hope is that when they see that this is unsustainable, that the regime is unsustainable, they come to us to negotiate a peaceful and orderly transfer of government, a transfer of power. And again, there countries like Brazil and Colombia might be useful at that point to try to make sure that this situation is resolved in a peaceful manner and an orderly manner. It is in nobody's interest to have an implosion in Venezuela. That would be Venezuela is already a threat for the region at this point, a security threat to the region. Imploding Venezuela will be even worse. So what we need to do is to make sure that this can be done in an orderly manner.
There was an election here, presidential elections here in the United States. Donald Trump was elected for a second term. Will there be any change? Because President Biden was a critic of the Venezuelan regime. Do you expect some kind of a change in the United States position, or they are keeping pressuring as they are pressuring the Venezuelan regime now?
Well, Galeano, what I can tell you about this is that we have been very grateful to both parties in the United States that we have been able to transform the Venezuela issue into a bipartisan policy. There are many things where the United States parties are not in agreement, but Venezuela is one of the few, I would say, that happily the two parties are in agreement. Yes, there might be some things that the Trump administration can do that the Biden administration didn't, or things that the Biden administration did that the Trump administration might think that they should do it in a different way. But I would say that both administrations have been extremely useful. And I would like to also recognize something that the Trump administration, President-elect Trump, has nominated Marco Rubio as Secretary of State and appointed Mike Waltz as National Security Council advisor. Both persons, both from Congress, one is a senator, the other one is a representative for the U.S., has been extremely helpful to our cause. Because they are very knowledgeable about what's going on in Venezuela. In general, in Latin America, this is probably the very good news is that we are going to have two people in very high positions in the new administration that know very well Latin America and understand the importance of Latin America to the United States, by the way. And particularly in Venezuela, regarding Venezuela, they know very well the situation in Venezuela. They have been in touch with us all the time. We got a very fluid conversation with them, with their teams, etc. And we are sure that the support of the United States, of the new administration, as well as the Biden administration, is going to be extremely helpful for establishing democracy in Venezuela.
Mr. De La Cruz, you have a personal relationship with María Corina Machado, and probably Gonzalez too. How are these people living in a situation like that? What is like to be the leader of opposition of a regime that is becoming more oppressive in the last decade?
María Corina is a phenomenon. It's something that it's a person that with an incredible strength, with an incredible determination, with an incredible capacity to sacrifice herself to make sure that Venezuela gets back to a democratic setting, that we get our freedoms back. She has been in hiding for a few months now, but she's been extremely active. We have daily meetings actually, and she is in touch with different, with many governments, with many presidents, and really it's impressive how she have been able to symbolize this determination of the Venezuelan people for freedom and democracy. People believe in her a lot. I mean, we had the last survey that we had. Basically, María Corina is supported by more than 80% of the population, even after all this situation that we're seeing, this state terrorism that we have been seeing in Venezuela. So I would say that if there is somebody who can, lead this until the end, as she likes to say, is her. No? So I am privileged to really know her and being able to work with her. And Edmundo González Urrutia is a hero of Venezuela. He's a person that didn't have any idea, any interest in becoming president. The situation that everybody knows, I'm not going to go through all the details of how finally, instead of María Corina, it was Edmundo González Urrutia who had to run for president. So he has been sacrificing a lot, actually. He was a very well considered person, a diplomat, a distinguished diplomat in Venezuela. And now doing all this and risking basically his freedom, his life even, is something that has to be recognized by everybody. They have a fantastic relationship between them, a lot of coordination. And now that Mundo González is outside Venezuela, he's helping a lot on the relationship that we are having international. He's been doing a lot of tours in Europe. So we think that this is contributing a lot to fortifying, to strengthening this international coalition that we are working on. Hopefully we can bring Mundo González also to the United States at a given point in the next few weeks. We will see that. We are discussing that with the outgoing and the incoming administration.
Is there a change of the way you do things? There was the initiative to try to make the international community to accept Guaido as the president some years ago. Is there a different approach to try to increase pressure in the Venezuelan regime now with the election, the consensus among neighbors in the whole world about the illegitimacy of the last elections? A change of approach we are seeing now?
Well, what changed are the circumstances and the legitimacy of the president-elect. Guaido became a interim president because of a constitutional technicality. Since we didn't recognize, and 60 countries in the world didn't recognize the fraud that Maduro performed, didn't recognize what he said that he was won, actually. He performed a fraud. In the previous election, the constitution in Venezuela basically appoint the president of the Congress as a interim president, and then they have to, typically there should be elections organized, presidential election that should be organized in order to have a new president. At that point, the Chavismo was stronger than it is now. There were less cracking inside. And again, now what we have is a president-elect by a large margin. The Chavismo is extremely weak. Cracking is bigger. If you apply pressure on a healthy tree, it's very difficult to take it down, right? But if you apply pressure on a tree that is, an old tree that is already cracking, well, you can probably tear it down. And this is what we think is happening right now. Basically, what we expect, again, is that the government, the regime in Venezuela, they understand that they are not viable anymore. And they understand that we are ready to give them guarantees and we want to know what guarantees they need in order to consider them, in order for them
For a peaceful change
for
of
a peaceful change, an orderly change of government. Yes.
Rafael Cruz, thank you very much for your time with us.
On the contrary, and really, Galeano, very, very nice meeting you here and with your audience in Brazil.
Thank you.
Thank you.